Thank you for the trivia. And it's brought more thinking to be done. Rightio, let's get into. Oh, somebody's put a link up. Kathy, you can look at that behind the scenes. Save me doing that work. Let's get some slides going because, as we were mentioned, for those who were in early, this is a pretty big session in terms of straight into the meat or the pointy end of safe system assessments and how we do them. So we did really concentrate on that. What is the philosophy of the safe system, and are we all, aligned in those principles, and are we understanding that, how we operate and everything like that? This session's about really getting into that assessment. We're recording, as we talked about before. But this module, we're going to get into some specific guidelines that are available and show you where you can gather more information about particular aspects of the assessment framework itself. We're going to talk a lot about the assessment matrix, and I'll introduce you to that and show you how to fill it out, and how to write up a report. What are the requirements of a safe system assessment report, so we get consistency there, and how we categorize treatments that we recommend or we suggest within a safe system assessment, how we categorize those into these two categories of primary or supporting. Now, remember to count your ollies. So we went through the safe system, this philosophy, and we used this diagram, but there's many out there that we could have sort of talked to. We talked about those principles and the elements, and that human bodies are vulnerable, the mistake making, the fact that we are in that, we need to think about what is our responsibility as designers and road managers and the like. And also in there, we had that aspiration of zero death and serious injury. So we're all pretty comfortable, I believe, with that. There's little, further things to be investigated, but we're pretty good there. And then we delved quickly into that exposure, likelihood, and severity. And you're sort of probably waking up in the middle of the night thinking exposure, likelihood, and severity. I've been banging on about it so much, but you'll see shortly why it's so important. And from your module 2 assignments, where you looked at the intersection close by, I was pretty impressed with how people were able to nicely sort of categorize things pretty well. We had a little bit of challenge with exposure, some people, just getting that clear in your mind. I think the actual way that a safe system assessment is laid out for you to do will help you in that exposure. So we'll go through that. In terms of the severity, good people are really generally pretty good understanding speed, angle, vulnerability, and those sorts of things being those big factors. And we delved into a bit of the science behind that with some of these graphs and different crash types and analyzing that. And we popped in there, different speeds and angles and different crash types and different road users involved. And we've got all of that out to the point where we provided that colored chart, and we'll be using the colored chart, which I don't have a slide of here. I've got one later on that we'll look to. But they are, they're the sort of the building blocks you're going to need, plus a whole lot of your existing knowledge in terms of if you're a road safety auditor or involved in traffic engineering or road design, or if you're a bit more in the periphery of that, but you'll be utilizing some existing knowledge, no doubt, to supplement your ability to do these assessments. All right, but how do we do these assessments is the question. And I thought we might chuck up a poll, Kathy, and it's not one to answer, but this is for me to just gauge where people are at in this course. So I don't know if there's polls there. Oh, it is there. Here we go. It's popped up. What has been your involvement with safe system assessments? Nothing. Safe system what now? I've heard the term, but I don't know much more. I've had one done on one of my projects. Done one. I live, breathe, and eat safe system assessments. So let's see where we're at as a group. Okay. Let's display that. So most people in that heard the term and not really much more. A few had them done on projects, so that's good. That's an indication of their sort of mounting presence across Australia and New Zealand. A couple of people done them, been part of teams doing them maybe, so that's good. Or a couple of people living, breathing and eating safe system assessments. I love it. And a couple down the other end, a sort of skewed bell curve there. Beautiful. Okay, that's good. That's good. Let's get rid of that. And I'm going to sort of start from the very basic building blocks of the assessment. And you cannot do the assessment without understanding the sort of safe system philosophy. So that's why we spend time on it and a few of those other things. But why has this thing come about? Well, there was a time sort of before 2016 where the safe system was something that road authorities, governments were all committed to, signed up to. Yep, we're in, we're doing it. Yep, everything must be safe system, comments like that. And, you know, all projects must be safe system. And there was a lot of head scratching done at practitioner level. What on earth does this actually mean? What does it mean when we're making decisions in a design, in traffic operations perspective? How do we actually make calls on this? And then there was debates. You know, people would say, well, we're doing a infrastructure program and all the things we'll fund have to be safe system. And you know, what's that? And, you know, some people would say, oh, well, it's wire rope safety barrier or some particular treatment. And you'd say, well, you know, yes, in some contexts that aligns well with safe system principles in a lot of contexts, but there might be contexts where it's not so well aligned with safe system principles. And how are we going to make some judgments around this? And then Austroads was really good at sort of stepping in around that time and saying, okay, we need some sort of assessment framework for alignment with safe system principles. And they produced this document, released in late 2016. Now, I wasn't one of the authors of this, but I was on the working group as part of it. And what the document does, actually, let me tell you first of all, this document and this framework is a risk assessment framework. It's just got a certain lens put on it. So you've got to think about it as a risk assessment framework. What we've got here, some key sections within a safe system assessment framework in the Austroads document. And the first one you see up here is, what is the assessment objective? Why is the assessment happening? What is the scale of the assessment? Because you can do assessments of a remote community, a mine site, or a individual splitter island. And so the scale there is very different. You could do it as on a whole infrastructure program if you wanted, theoretically. And what's the depth of the assessment? And there is ability to go quite deep into assessment, very detailed and intense, or it can be a somewhat lighter touch. Now, that one's been clarified a little bit across the jurisdictions, and I'll talk to that in a little more detail. Then we go into the project context and understanding what are the project objectives, what's the function of the road, the movement of place categorization, the speed environment, different road users, vehicles, all of that sort of stuff. Gathering that context to help us do the assessment, but also to help us make meaningful suggestions to the project team for improved alignment with safe system principles that understands why the project's happening, the objectives and the like. Then we've got the matrix. And this is the central part of most safe system assessments, and it deals with the exposure, the likelihood and the severity. And also we look at the other elements or pillars of the safe system, being the road users, the vehicles, and the post-crash care. Then we make some suggestions. Here's how you could improve your project in terms of alignment with safe system principles. And we start to categorize those into, are they going to be really big improvements in alignment with safe system principles, or is it more just helping out a little bit? I'm going to go through that shortly. But what happened is in around 2016, this was released. And before that, myself and a colleague and a guy in Western Australia were really the only people doing these, what we were calling safe system audits at the time, and trying to fill that gap. Now, ours was slightly different, but we were doing something, which was a lot of that was taken into this document. And this was pretty good, but really there were only a handful of these assessments had been done when this document was produced. So what happened was that it went out there, and then people started using it. More and more people started using it and doing these assessments, and lots of things were discovered that were not answered in this document. Like nobody had foreseen people coming up with these things to try and decide. One or two things were found to be not right, or not the best way to do it in this document. Yeah, but a lot of stuff missing. A lot of stuff was really good, and it continues to be very good. But anyway, the couple of jurisdictions, so Victoria and South Australia, then produced their own guidelines, which sort of fill in those gaps of things that were missing and clarify a few things and correct one or two things. So those are available publicly, and actually you'll find when you get past the front cover, these documents are the same. I mean, apart from, global replace of Vic roads with Hippie at the time is pretty much the difference. And that's fine. I mean, that's good, because we're seeing consistency across a few jurisdictions. And what we're seeing now is that across industry, all across Australia and New Zealand, pretty much everybody is falling into line, utilising the Austroads guidance, this guidance, and we've provided a few supplementary fact sheets for some gaps that were still there even after these documents. But this whole process is evolving and getting better, and people getting better understanding of it. We've provided all of these into into Moodle, so you'll be able to download and see these. They're all available online free of charge anyway. And we put those fact sheets, or the link to the fact sheets. So all of that information gathered together gives you a really great, you're in a great position to be able to undertake these assessments in a consistent manner that aligns with Austroads, the Austroads process, and little bits of stuff happening in some jurisdictions. Queensland, the TMR Safer Roads team has a few little extra spreadsheet tools and things they like to sometimes use, but generally everybody's pretty consistent with how this is done. Okay, pop your questions in as I'm going, but I will now sort of take you through how to do an assessment. And I'm going to start right at the end. And I'm going to show you sort of what an output, or one of the key sort of bits of the output, would look like. And this is a bit of a hypothetical, but it's what people are looking for. And you see here, it's the Safe System Assessment Crash Risk. And you can see there, lower scores are better. So think of it as risk. Lower risk is better. And we refer to it as Safe System Assessment Score, but we're trying to get to 0. And what you're seeing there is a little bit potentially hard to see, but we have run-off road, head-on, intersection, pedestrian, cyclists, and motorcyclists. And they're the crash types. And they're the crash types that present almost all of our death and serious injury on Australian and New Zealand roads. There is this other category put in there, and that's to try to pick up anything in your particular context of a road design or bit of road you're looking at that's not covered by any of those other crash types. And so some examples could be crashes with animals. It could be level crossing, railway level crossing crashes. It could be e-scooter crashes if you decided that you're not going to treat that as a pedestrian because it's it's a very different sort of mode to investigate. Yeah, so you've got a bit of flexibility in that. You will have to define that and document what you've decided is that other category, but it's there for you to work with. Now, what you get then is the red, or whatever color you decide to use, is the existing conditions. Okay, so this is, what is the intersection currently like, or what is the length of road currently like? Okay, and you score that out. Then you look at any design options that are provided to you. Okay, so they say we've got 3 options here. Design option, well, number 2 they've called it here, is to put a roundabout at this intersection. Design option 3A is a modified T with a signalized modified T. And option 3B is a standard T intersection signalized. Okay, so they're the options that are being put down to assess. And then you go through a process of scoring the existing conditions and each of the designs using a particular methodology, which I'm about to take you through, and it spits out scores for each crash type. And so you're immediately able to see where you're getting benefit or not getting benefit of this altered infrastructure. You could also see from the existing conditions where your risks are highest for different crash types. So what I'm going to do is take you through this step by step. But before we jump into how do you get that score for each one of these, we've got to ask, what is the context of this project? So you've been asked to do a safe system assessment. Maybe they've come to you and they said, can you form a team of assessors and do the safe system assessment for our proposed upgrades to this intersection? And you say, yep, sure, happy to help. We're going to need to understand a bit about your project and the context. And Austroads has provided these prompt questions in the Safe System Assessment Framework document. So you can use these. You could add more questions if you've got more that you want to build further context, but these are a pretty good starting point. What's the reason for the project? And what are you trying to address here? Congestion easing, safety issues, speed compliance, freight efficiency. Why is this project happening? What's the function of the road, existing and in the future? Have you done a movement in place? What's the movement in place categorization? All of this different thinking. What's the flow of traffic, pedestrians? What's the current speed environment? What's the future speed environment? Have things recently changed? You're starting to think then, how well do these align with different safe system threshold speeds? And, have any commitments been made? Political commitments, community commitments into different speeds, that speed limits or the like. And, you want to be factoring any of that stuff into your assessment to make meaningful recommendations. Remember, we can get pretty good alignment with safe system principles at different speeds, just as long as there's different infrastructure and different designs in place. What road users are present? What do we got? Elderly, school children, cyclists, what's out there? And what is the vehicle composition? What's the makeup here? What's the design vehicle? What's the checking vehicle? What's the we've got motorcyclists, what's the different any different road users, e-scooters, gathering that information. Now, my sort of practical tip as a safe system assessor is that as soon as I'm engaged or with a team to do a safe system assessment, we say, I send them this. I'll say, hey, we want to gather this information, right? If you can fill out as much as you can, and provide us with any documentations that help us understand this, that'd be wonderful. Sometimes we also hold an initial workshop, and this is really starts your agenda of that workshop, and you ask them questions and you look at land use maps and aerial imagery and understand the context and everything they're trying to achieve. And it really helps you. You've got that nice platform to be able to then go and undertake your assessment and provide meaningful input into the project. So then you get into, right, okay, how are we going to get to those scores? And this is the Safe System Assessment Matrix. And I'm going to spend quite a bit of time on this slide. We will have a stretch break after I've finished this, this slide, but I'll be on it for a while. We'll jump in between it and the next few and back. But pop your questions in as we're going, and Kathy will feed those to me, but I'm gonna talk you through this. You'll see the columns. The columns are those crash types that I just went through. Okay, the crash types. Now, runoff road, head-on, and intersection are all focused on vehicle crashes, cars and trucks. Pedestrian are crashes where the pedestrian is the one that's injured, and almost always, if a pedestrian's involved, they're the ones injured. Cyclists are the ones that are injured. Motorcyclists, the ones that are injured, right? So anybody who's done crash investigation studies, black spot program development, different crash investigations, or works with crash coding, you're probably pretty okay with this. You understand that fairly well. There was slight differences, but it's generally pretty well understood. So if a vehicle is driving up to an intersection, and you're imagining this crash happening, right? It's not, you're not reviewing crashes and trying to fill this out. You're imagining crashes in the future, predicting these crashes could occur. If the one in your mind that you're visualizing is a car turning at an intersection and hitting a pedestrian crossing the road, for example, that is a pedestrian crash in this thinking context. It happened at an intersection, but it's a pedestrian crash because a pedestrian is the one that's being injured. If a vehicle was to, in your mind, you're looking at it, they're designing this new thing on the outside of a curve at high speed, has a bus shelter or something, and you're thinking, well, okay, I'm worried now that vehicles might leave the road and collide with pedestrians at this bus shelter. Again, that is a pedestrian crash if the pedestrians, getting struck is your vision of the crash. If in that scenario, you're also worried about the occupants of the vehicle being injured when it hits the bus shelter or the power poles or the trees behind it or whatever it is, then you'll be putting it into runoff road as well if you're still worried about the pedestrian. Okay, so you'll be accounting for the risk in both of those. So the other, you're going to end up having to make some sort of statement in your cell here as to what you're thinking about, e-scooters or rear end crashes will fit into this if they are not generated from an intersection. So if you're worried about back of queue crashes or people doing a sudden stop at an intersection and rear ends in that sense, that actually has been decided to be categorized as an intersection crash. However, if the rear end is associated with a mid-block crossing point, school crossing, or pedestrian operated signals mid-block or something like that, or, people emerging from driveways or these sorts of things, then you'd categorize it within the other category and you would make a little commentary around that there. So they're the crash types. And so then what you do is you look at these different rows, and what have we got? Severity, likelihood, and exposure. Okay, we're all very comfortable with that, and that's good. That's why we spent time on it. Let's make sure we understand this. Okay, so exposure, you'll see here, these dot points are just some thought generators. AADT, AADT, and AADT for each approach. AADT being annual average daily traffic, the amount of cars and trucks going through this road section. AADT has been put there for other, but it might be, number of scooters. I suppose you could call that an AADT of, and the T being the traffic there in that case would be scooters. But pedestrians, we see pedestrian numbers, cyclist numbers, and motorcyclist numbers for motorcyclists, of course. So we've got this, but do we put that actual number in here? No. So if your AADT is 4,000 vehicles a day, for example, do you put 4,000 in there? No. You need to go to the scoring reference sheet. And this is straight out of the Austroads framework document, but we've sort of reproduced it here. And you'll see over here that we have these scores. The scores range from a 0 all the way up to a 4. And so what you have to do is find where that traffic volume fits within this. And so we're looking at the exposure. So let's look at a 2 here. Let's look at a 2. Volume of vehicles that might be involved in a particular crash type are moderate. Therefore, exposure is moderate. For runoff road head-on and other crash types, the AADT is between 1,000 and 5,000. So that works because we said our traffic volume was 4,000. So we've got a 2. We just take that 2 and we go back and we pop it in here. You might write up here what your traffic volume was. And 2. Okay. And we know for head-on, it's going to be the same. We give it a 2 as well. Intersection, we want to know what the side road intersection volume is as well, and we add that. So if we've got 4,000 and the side road is 500, for example, well, we still just call it a 2 because, we go back to this, 4,000 plus 500, 4,500 still sits between there. But if our side road was another 4,000, well, that then bumps us up to between 5,000 and 10,000. So it would go up to a 3. And you can see there in these volumes, we've got between 1,000 to 5,000, 5,000 to 10,000, greater than 10,000 for a 4. Now, these are just for the cars and trucks, remember. Down here, we see less than 1,000 for a 1, and no intersection or no side road or no pedestrians or no cyclists for that 0. For pedestrian, cyclists, motorcyclists, we're seeing 10 units a day, less than 10 units a day crossing or being exposed to this crash type that you're imagining is a 1. 10 to 50 for a 2, 50 to 100 for a 3, and more than 100 in a day is a 4. So if we've got 500 on the side road, we're getting a 2 there. And other, we may be worried about crashes from vehicles emerging from driveways or something. We're going to base that on our traffic volume again, so a 2. And then pedestrians. Now, interesting thing that seems to play out, and hopefully this is changing a lot, but is that we get some pretty amazing data usually for these traffic volumes. And we get horrible data if we actually get any data for pedestrians and cyclists. And people say, oh, well, there's lots of pedestrians there, or oh, it's not really occasional cyclists, but we don't get numbers the way we seem to for traffic. Hopefully that changes and we start collecting lots of data on that, so we're able to do that. But this is where you might need to make a little bit of a judgment call as an assessor and decide what you are going to put in for pedestrians and cyclists if you're not given that detail. So you're right, you can write a little bit of your assumption and reasoning if you want, a little something there, and you come up with a score. And maybe for pedestrians, you say 3, and for cyclists, you say 1 because you've decided that there's almost no cyclists. They use a parallel route. You're out there for a long time, you didn't see any, you know the area, and you know cyclists don't use it. And motorcyclists, you sort of scratch your head. Sometimes you get good data from your tube counts and they're able to separate motorcyclists out, sometimes not so much. And so you can make an assumption on that. Usually 1% of AADT is a pretty good rule of thumb, so we can give it a 2 for there. So you're able to come to these with minimal subjectivity. Like you can just get data, go to your scoring sheet, put your number in. Pretty clean cut if you're given data. If you're not and you're having to make assumptions, yeah, and predictions, okay, it's a little bit, there's a little bit more subjectivity to it, but you can sort of go through and do that. And then you've got your scoring line for exposure. Then you go to the next line, and you go to likelihood. You said, what is the likelihood of crash? And we can see there some dot points of some of the factors that would influence likelihood. By no means are these all, and you'll find lots of other things out there that you want to put in. But for run-off road, for example, we're seeing speed, geometry, presence of shoulders or no shoulders, and barriers or not, hazard offsets, different delineation, guidance, signage, and all of that, etc., lots more. And what you're going to do is sort of look at all of this in the existing environment and the design when you get to that. You're going to sort of understand and make a judgment call. And you go back to your scoring reference sheet and you see where things fit in this likelihood column. So let's have a look at a 1. It is highly unlikely that a given crash type will occur. Well, that's not providing much help, is it? Okay, let's go up and see what else we can find here. What's a 2? It is unlikely that a given crash type will occur. That's a 3. It is likely that a given crash type will occur. Okay, we're not getting a huge amount of guidance here, are we? Okay, 4 looks like there's some more words. The 4. The likelihood of individual road user error leading to a crash is high given the infrastructure in place, e.g. high approach speed to a sharp curve, priority moving control, filtering across several opposing lanes, high speeds. Okay, we've got a few bits of an idea there. If we go down to a 0, there is only minimal chance of that a given crash type can occur for individual road user given the infrastructure in place. And the extreme behavior or substantial vehicle failure could lead to a crash. Okay, so this one, the whole likelihood scoring is subjective. And it relies on your understanding of what increases the likelihood of crashes. Road safety auditors tend to be exceptional at this scoring category and really have good understanding, and those who have done lots of crash reduction studies or crash investigation studies or black spot and really understand a few of those key characteristics. But the important thing to remember is this is a relative score, because if we took this as an absolute, we'd say highly unlikely across everything, because crashes are, in the scheme of things, highly unlikely. But we're talking about that relative to the other existing intersections or areas around your state or the like. And we know that the 4 is really held for some things we know have some significant deficiencies or are requiring high cognitive workload for the road users, or have really significant constraints and in terms of sight lines, or really complex decision-making points and those sorts of things. And so you start to gauge a bit of a feel for where you're going to put things. And speed is going to be a big influencer, but also all of those characteristics you were looking at, you found in your module 2 assignment, and that we talked about influencing the likelihood. And so you can see some points put in here. As thought starters, there'll be more. You might get the pedestrians and go, yeah, okay, design the facilities, whether or not there's separation or not, number of conflict points, speeds. But you might also factor in there, hey, actually, all the pedestrians are kids, and they come out of there and they're all playing and skylarking around, and the likelihood of something happening is up because of the way that they're interacting and operating and the like. So you can adjust for those sorts of factors. And so you get to the point where you're then dot pointing a whole lot of these factors in a cell. This is what I thought about. This made me want to make this score higher. This made me want to make this score lower. Dot point, dot point, dot point. And you've ended up arriving on a score. And, you might say, for runoff road, I'm going to say, well, the area's got sealed shoulders, audio tactile edge line, good delineation, good lighting. Everything's really quite nice in there. But I know people are going to fall asleep and they're going to be texting and doing all sorts of human-related things we don't want them to do, but they do it. And so I can't quite bring myself to go to 0. 1, highly unlikely. It's pretty good infrastructure. The speeds are reasonably low. I'm going to go with a 1. You end up saying, okay, put a 1 there. And you'll go through and you'll do that. And maybe you'll want to put a 2 there for head on because you've got not much separation or something like that. And intersections, well, you're going to look at that intersection now. You're going to ignore the fact that it's low volume because, well, actually, no, I take that back. You can factor that into here as well, but it's predominantly been taken into account there. If you had a high volume, it will increase that exposure score, which will flow through and give a higher risk. But you're looking at, is it signalized control? Is it give way control? What's the speed? How's it designed? What's the visibility, conflict points? And maybe you decide to go a 2 there. Other, you've factored all of these things in, you want to say 1. Remember, you've accounted for the number of vehicles going through there, the number of pedestrians, the number of cyclists. So we're looking at just the facilities themselves. So this may be, well, we'll put a 3 for pedestrians. So maybe it's got really good sight lines. It's got a pedestrian refuge. It's got good lighting at a point. It's well positioned on pedestrian desire line. Everything's looking good. You're really happy with it all. And you're happy to say, well, actually, I think, I'm only going to put 2 here. And cyclists, you might say, well, there's no cycling facilities, there's no cycle lane, there's no alternate paths, in any area. Maybe part of the reason why our volumes are low, but that, forget about that because we've accounted for volume And you're just going to say, well, actually, I'm going to say a 4 there because it's really, there's nothing, and it's inherently got issues if cyclists use it. And then motorcyclists, well, you look through and you're thinking about motorcyclists at intersection, and they're smaller, so they're hidden, they're inherently unstable. Those are likelihood sort of factors you're putting in there, but you're not thinking about their vulnerability because that'll come in the severity, but it's just what's the chance that they're going to crash, and maybe you go a 3 for that in there. Okay. Now, I'm going through this very quickly, obviously, and just sort of high level broad brushing it. You're going to actually need to do some justification in each of these when you get to that cell in the matrix. How did you arrive at that score? So we've got there, and we've got these scores. You're using this, you're looking at the data sheet, and then you go, right, okay, now time for me to look at the severity of crashes. So this is where you're getting your head in the space of crash is now happening. How bad is it going to be? And what are the factors that are going to influence how bad it's going to be? Well, we're seeing speed, 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 speed. Speed is going to be important, obviously. The basics of biomechanics of injury. Speed is one of those big components. Then, we're seeing things like, well, what is the roadside furniture? Is it flexible barriers? Are there areas to deflect energy along it, cushioning, or the like? So those could be there. Well, we've got heavy vehicle percentage is really high. So if these head-ons happen, it's going to be more severe, maybe, if vehicles are striking heavy vehicles, and that's not often like a major influencer compared to speed, for example, but it's something you'd be factoring in. You might even factor in over in pedestrians. Again, there's a whole lot of older road users or younger road users. They're more vulnerable to injury. Should we factor a little bit of that in? But speeds, angles, impact angles, these are our big ones. And so you sort of dot point a few of these out. Again, and you go back to our crash severity column here, and you have a look at what's written here. And I don't need to go through that in a whole lot of detail because we've provided you with this colored graph to help you out. And so this helps you be a bit more consistent, less subjective on your scoring, because if you're able, if it's one of these sort of crash types that are being put forward, you're able to get a general feel for what sort of scoring might be appropriate. So if you're thinking about, a car versus car, side impact, right angle crash, you're on this line somewhere, and it really just depends on what sort of speed you think it might be happening. If you think it's going to happen in around a 60K zone, we'd be pretty much happily sort of saying in the 3 for severity. Maybe if you thought, it is a 60 kilometre per hour speed limit, but I'm thinking operating speeds, and especially if we're actually seeing the crash happen, because it might be people putting the foot down or the like. So I think it might be happening a little bit higher. I'm starting to drift into 4 territory, so I might be putting it 4. So that's sort of how you can use this. If you look at the sort of words they're using here, and let's take a 3, for example. Should a crash occur, it is likely that it will result in fatality or serious injury to any road user involved. Kinetic energies are moderate, but are not effectively dissipated before reaching the road user. So that's, not run out along a barrier or cushioned by something, or the angles and vectors aren't good enough to push the energy into the environment. Instead, it's going into another road user. And so use that other information we've provided, and get yourself, the ability to sort of mark some scores. You need a bit of judgment with this. And there are crash types that ain't going to exist in this lot, like a side swipe crash. So, but I don't think, I think you can make some judgments around that and think, well, that's the energy in that's not going to be super bad in terms of going to the occupant of other vehicles, isn't it? Side swipes could happen quite high speeds, and where am I going to put this? Well, it's going to be better than a side impact. Is it head on compared to that? It's probably going to be somewhere quite near the bottom of this chart. Okay, so you then go through and you analyze that, you look at the chart, you imagine crashes happening out there, you factor all of this in, you put some dot points and you make your call. So runoff road, you might say, well, I'm going to put a 2 for that. Head on, I'm going to put a 1 because I know that sits higher than the runoff road. Intersection, I'm going to put a 2. Other, you end up saying a 1 because you're predominantly thinking about side swipes, maybe, for example. And pedestrians, you think, okay, well, I know their vulnerability is really low, and I've looked at the chart and I'm imagining the speeds, and I'm going to put a 4 for pedestrians. And then you go cyclists and you think, well, okay, probably pretty close to pedestrians. And I look at the chart again, they get a 4 as well. And motorcyclists, well, they're a little bit better than those, but they're not great. So I'm going to put a 3 for them. Okay, and we're at a point now where we've put numbers in each cell of our matrix. I'm going to change colors here. So you're also going to have to do some documentation and justification of how you arrived at this number. It's not just like I did there, and I think I'll put a 3 there, and you got to think this through a bit more. But then what you do is you go through and you multiply. And you multiply 2 by 1 by 2, and you get a 4. You do 2, 2, 4, and 4, 8, and then we've got it 2, and we've got, so we've got 6, 24, and 16, and what do we got? 6, 12. Okay, so you see there, we multiplied them out, and we got our scores. And, without, in our completely hypothetical scenario here, we know the pedestrians are the furthest aligned from safe system principles here, and cyclists and are next, and motorcyclists, and then we know intersections, head on runoff road are fairly low and others are low. So immediately you can start to gather that. If you want to get a total score for this area, you add these, okay? You add your scores along the bottom to get a score out of 448. I'm not going to add that now, but that's your score out of 448. Okay, so that is the way that you arrive at those scores. Now I'm going to pause there, Kathy. I'm going to see if we've got any questions, and I'll talk to that a little bit, and then I'll do a sort of worked example and show you some actual ones. Well, actually, after some questions, we'll probably take our stretch break and fill up our waters and the like. Any questions at this stage, Kathy?
No questions just yet, and more just corrections on your calculations.
Oh, what did I stuff up? Just doing it quickly.
2 times 3 times 3 equals 18.
Sorry, yep. Good, well done. Prize to that person who can calculate better than me running through quick. Well done.
Oh, there you go, easy fix. Any other questions at this stage? I guess we're looking for questions on all of that. Or we might give everyone 5 minutes to have a stretch break and so on, and maybe think of some questions and type them in the meantime.
Yeah, let's take 3 minutes, fill up the waters, and we'll get back to it. And I'll walk you through this in a bit of a worked example. And then, like any of this, the easiest way for you to learn is to just do one yourself. And that's what we're going to get you to do at the end of this session. Go out and really do one and really nut it out for yourself. All right, let's take 3 minutes, and we'll come back.
Thanks.
Let's get back into it. So there we go, made a mess of this slide, but it's showing you sort of how that's worked through. Now, let me check. Did any other questions come in there? Yes, people pointing out I can't do grade 3 multiplication. Let's carry on now. Okay. So let's take another one and see it sort of fleshed out a little bit more. And, you know, so say we've got this intersection, for example, and you can see it's a priority controlled intersection, give way intersection. You can see a vehicle coming out, got a bit of footpath, some guideposts, power poles, one lane in each direction, sort of an approach to a town. But they're saying, oh, we want to upgrade this intersection. We've got some concerns about it, and it's areas growing and all of that. So we've come up with 3 design options for this intersection upgrade. And here's our first design option, and you can see we've decided we want to, one of the options could be a roundabout here, single lane roundabout. There it is. The next option we've got here is a signalized intersection. I'm going to signalize it, and we're going to sort of keep that curve there. We'll call it a modified T, and signalized intersection. And then our third one option would be that sort of conventional T intersection with some slip lanes, and that's there are 3 options. So what you do when you're you're handed all of this package, there's our 3 designs, that's the area, you've got some context and you've got some information from them. You go out and you look at the existing conditions and you gather your intel around that, and then you fill out one of these matrices, and you do it for the existing condition. Okay, so what is there now? Put the designs away to the side. What are the existing conditions? How many vehicles are we talking about? What's the AADT on these roads? What's the intersection AADT? Other pedestrian. Don't worry if you can't read the words in this. I'm just sort of using it as a demonstration. And then you pop your scores in there. And you'll see then when you go to do likelihood, you're putting there factors that increase the likelihood of crashes. And you dot point some of those out. Factors that decrease the likelihood, that dot point a few of them out. And then you put a score there. Now, interestingly, that score has a 0.5. Now, 0.5 is discouraged, but it is acceptable under the different guidelines that we have. Okay, so Austroads sort of made no commentary around the precision of the scoring. So they didn't make any comments really at all. And as a result, people started to put some pretty precise numbers to this. And we saw people putting a likelihood of 2.73, something like that. And then you multiply that out and you get a 12-digit number, or sorry, to 12 decimal places or something when you multiply it out. And for the fact that we know this has got some subjectivity to it, it's really just a sort of risk assessment methodology. That was kind of crazy. So the Victorian guidelines, when they came out, said, all right, enough of that. You can go to a 0.5 if you absolutely must, but no more. So, yeah, you try to stick to whole numbers. There is a bit of beauty. There is a bit of beauty to the fact that it comes in these chunked segments, that you can't get to this refined precision. First of all, the beauty is that, it's never that clear. Like, even when we pretend to go with a crash reduction factor of, you'll have many of you have done these different things, and you go, oh well, a splitter island, we have 45% crash reduction factor. Well, yeah, I mean that's 45% given off, a study of 100 splitter islands and how much they reduce crashes by. But even still, it's very rubbery around that. But we've got to pick something. And the other one is that it sort of locks you into having to make some step changes to a design to actually change the score. And that plays out with, okay, we'll take runoff road likelihood, for example, or, the total score. If you've got an edge line or a sealed shoulder and you're debating a 2 meter sealed shoulder or a 2.5 meter sealed shoulder, it's probably not even that change going to be enough to warrant a change in a 0.5 of your likelihood score. It might just get you a 0.5 maybe, but multiply that through, and it's not making significant alterations to that total score. And to a degree, that's really good, because what we're about here is making step changes, getting transformative change to the network to align with safe system principles. I think there's still a place for in-depth analysis as to whether the 2.5 or 3 meter sealed shoulder is a better option, and the cost of that across the network and the savings. That's a completely different study, right? That would be misusing this tool probably. So we've got then the score there, and then you do the same for the severity, and what increases the severity, dot point a few things, what decreases the severity in your opinion at this site, put a score there, put a total score. And you do that through all of these, and you've got your scores here, add them up, and you get a score there, and look at that, 118.5 out of 448 for the existing conditions. That is the existing conditions alignment with safe system principles. It really just sets us a benchmark score, or a baseline score, right? That's where we're sitting. Then you go, okay, give me that design. Give me that roundabout design. Let's have a look at that. And what you do is you take this matrix, the existing conditions matrix, you copy it in its entirety. You paste it. And then you start modifying it by crossing parts out, that when they build the roundabout, just as they've designed it, go away. So you go, well, okay, get rid of that because that's gone, get rid of that, that's gone, they're going to upgrade all of that. Or these are going to be new things that improve or things that don't improve, so we add them in a different color. And, you go through modifying and adding. And if you're going to change a score, you change the color so people can tell, okay, this is where I'm getting some changes in score. This one stays the same. You go through and you do that for, your one design there. And then you go back and you take the existing conditions matrix again, copy it, paste it again. And you do the same thing for the next design option they have. Okay, cross that out. So add that bit in, that bit, cross those out, modify this, change this, add notes here. And then you do the same again. And you do this just for as many options as are provided. And what that does then is it gives you an existing conditions matrix, matrices for each of the design options. And you're then able to sort of produce these overarching scores, which sort of say, well, your baseline was 118.5. If you build the roundabout just as you've designed it, that brings it down to 90. If you do the modified signalized T, 99, T intersection, 105. So what I see from that is, any of your proposals improve alignment with safe system principles. The roundabout as they stand at the moment gives you the best alignment with safe system principles. But none of them are zero. So we can continue to work on these to discover what else we can do that's sort of practical that you can achieve. And you can get this next level of refinement, which we already saw this one, but it helps us to then sort of drill into where can we do things. So you're saying then make some recommendations, and you might say, hey, you know, the roundabout, while it came out on top, it was actually not great for cyclists. And, you know, cyclists are coming out as the worst thing overall here in alignment as an individual crash type. So we really recommend that you provide cyclist facilities on the outside, and here's some ideas on how it could look, or these sorts of things. You might say, well, you know, motorcyclists consistently scoring badly across the board, and are there things you could do? Could you use motorcycle friendly signage? Could you do other things? So you're then able to start to do that, and you make these suggestions, I'll call them, to the project team. I mean, a safe system assessor has no regulatory power, or can't demand changes. I mean, you're just providing advice. Here's how you could improve those scores if you want to go down that path. And the one little extra trick around the suggestions that you make. So you're saying, hey, if you're going to do that roundabout, here's some suggestions. Yeah, let's do a separated bike facility around there. And we're going to say that that is a primary treatment because we're categorizing it. Is it primary or is it supporting? So primary treatments are any road planning, design or management considerations that virtually eliminate the potential for fatal or serious injuries occurring in association with foreseeable crash types. Okay, so you're thinking about a particular crash type, and are we virtually eliminating the chance that that will result in death or serious injury? So not necessarily like eliminating that crash type, but the chance that it results in death or serious injury. Supporting treatments are road planning design considerations that improve the overall level of safety associated with foreseeable crash types. So it does need to improve safety, but it's not expected to virtually eliminate the potential for fatal or serious injury occurring for that crash type. And then little one doesn't change the ability for a primary treatment to go in the future. Non-safe system, probably there just for terminology purposes. We don't tend to, it's not one of the categories where you'd be putting things in because you're not making recommendations for non-safe system aligned treatments. But this is probably something that's going to trip a lot of people up. And Austroads was pretty aware of that. So put some actual examples of infrastructure that we would generally categorize as primary treatments, and infrastructure we generally categorize as supporting treatments. And Kathy will be able to show you fairly soon where in the, here it comes, in the safe system assessment framework, which you have ability to download, you'll see there table 4.5, and you'll see that's for run-off road crashes. So talking about a specific crash type, and you'll see there that the green row are primary treatments. And we're seeing flexible roadside barriers and the like. And then the yellow and the orange you're seeing next one are the supporting ones. Now there's two types of supporting, but that's kind of been ignored in a lot of jurisdictions because it gets a bit too finicky. I don't know if finicky is a word, but it's a bit too much. So those are supporting. We're seeing, sort of wide run out areas, non-flexible barriers, so more rigid barrier systems, audio tactile and the like. We know these are going to reduce risk, but they're not going to virtually eliminate those crashes. And if you scroll down a bit into the next table, we see, there we go, head-on treatments. And you see again, lists of primary and supporting. You go down a bit more and we'll see the intersections pop out. So these are not all treatments possible. You'll come up with other things. You've got to sort of make a judgment call based on the principles, but this is going to help and guide you. So you might want to be referring back to that as you think about it. Okay, thank you, Kathy. So let's go back to my slides there. So what you're going to do is look at the design that we give you, score the existing conditions of the area without that design built in your mind, and then you're going to imagine it built in your mind, and then you're going to score that. Then you're going to say, for this design that you've given, here are some improvements. And then you're going to categorize every one of those things that you suggest that would improve the score, so reduce the score, into primary or supporting. And we'll take you through a template to show you this that you'll be using. Any questions before I jump into this, Kathy?
Yeah, we have heard some comments come through. Has a high original score ever justified revisiting the business case?
High original score. So as in, I assume that means a high score in the design. So like they provide a, yeah. So, I mean, examples of where it has certainly, made people revisit business cases, fundamentally change things is where the, well, some of the ripping out of roundabouts and replacing with traffic signals, for example, where the score went up, total score went up. So it was, there you go, putting that on top and just reminding them that at a statewide and national perspective, we have committed to the implementation of the SAFE system. What you're about to build goes the other way, and here are the scores to prove it. Yes, that certainly gets revisited and altered and changed and back to the start. Now, the whole business case might have, in traditional senses, look pretty good. They increased efficiency, did this and that, but that has been sort of helpful from that perspective. Yeah, often these are done early in the sort of development of the business case and the concept at that early stage. So it's part of that factoring in and, multi-criteria assessment, and, we've played all these options out, and we know what their SAFE system scores are, and we know what all these other bits and pieces are, and this is why we've landed on this option. So that's usually how it plays out. Okay.
Can you also please tell us what is motorcyclist friendly signage?
Oh, yeah, okay. So we know like galvanized steel posts that we would deem as frangible, when a car hits them, they break away, fold over very easily. Well, they're easily strong enough to kill a motorcyclist. So there's a variety of sort of signs out there. They're usually the low mount signs that are flexible in one way or another, or frangible in one way or another, at forces that won't kill motorcyclists. And so there are some different compressed rubber type ones, and there's some breakaway ones. For some low mount signs, they can work well. Nobody's yet come up with anything. We're actually working on one with Swinburne Uni at the moment for any higher, and they can cause a bit of maintenance challenges, the existing ones, but there are sort of these flexible sign ranges available. So the sign support, but also then some plastic sign faces as well. But yeah, I mean, you predominantly use those where your motorcycle risk is very high, just for the initial capital costs, but also some maintenance challenges. But yeah, as I say, keep an eye on the space, because there's, well, we are certainly working on one. I think Queensland's got another one in sort of production, because it's something that is a continual battle for motorcyclists in terms of leaving the road and hitting sign poles and being killed and seriously injured. Good question.
Thanks, Ken. That's all the questions for now.
Okay, so we've done the matrices and we've got that good score, but there are these other questions that are asked in a full SAFE system assessment, and they are quantitative. No, they are qualitative. They are not quantitative. We don't put numbers to these. We just put written answers. And this occurs in full safe system assessments. And they're these questions to sort of prompt your thinking around other wider safe system elements. They may influence your scoring, or they may just bring up other ideas completely. But the questions are straight out of Austroads, and you've got to go through and write little bits and pieces and notes around these. So they're categorized into road user, vehicle, and post-crash care. And the first one there is, are road users likely to be alert and compliant, and are there factors that might influence this? And then next one, what are the expected compliance and enforcement levels of alcohol, drugs, road rules, driving hours, speed? So you're starting to look at what are the users around here, and you might be looking at different communities because it's a remote community, or you might be looking at just the general run-of-the-mill sort of Brisbane area or Sydney area or something like that. So you might go, well, it's not that different to anywhere else, so I can't really make any meaningful commentary around this, but that's all right. At least you're thinking about it. What's the likelihood of driver fatigue? Are we out in the middle of nowhere and higher chance of fatigue? Can enforcement be conducted safely? This is a really interesting one, and often quite a wonderful exercise within a safe system assessment, if your client will agree to it, is to engage with the local highway patrol or the police and say, yeah, there's this upgrade plan to this stretch of road, and we're just interested in, if these upgrades happen, will you be able to do enforcement activities still? Is it going to alter things? And they're usually blown away by this. They love it. And they're like, oh, what's okay? You're putting barrier here. Okay, well, we used to pull over there to put to the speed camera, or if you do all that, we can't actually enforce any of this anymore because it doesn't meet our safe protocols for pulling people over or these sorts of things. And so you can then say, okay, well, maybe we suggest a few little tweaks here. And one particular successful one I was involved in, a big, $105 million upgrade of duplication of an outer suburban road. And that discussions with police were just fascinating. And they essentially, what ended up happening through these discussions was that the project team agreed to utilize an old stack site as an area that they would create for the booze bus, and an area up the road for the number plate recognition vehicle. And it actually provided almost like a purpose-built enforcement area facility for the police there, which I thought, for just going through and asking these questions was a pretty amazing outcome. Sometimes designers and project managers and everybody are really, get this stuff done anyway, but it's another sort of question that gets asked. Are road users, are there special road users, so entertainment precincts, elderly children, on-road activities and the like, any big sort of distractions, environmental factors, and big flashing signs and the like? Then it goes into the vehicles, and we see, what is the level of alignment with the ideals of safer vehicles? Now, this is very much like one that really is only relevant if it's, you're doing a mining operation, or again, a remote community or something like that, where you've got an idea of the fleet and what sort of vehicles and things they're using. It's a bit irrelevant for an individual intersection or a length of public road. Other factors might attract a large number of unsafe vehicles, percentage of heavy vehicles too high, are they recreational motorcyclists? Are there resources to detect non-roadworthy, overloaded, unregistered vehicles? Can enforcement of these activities be conducted safely as well? The non-roadworthy, overloaded style stuff. Has vehicle breakdown been catered for? That's an interesting one to think about. Some of these long continuous barrier jobs or motorway style upgrades, maybe where they're using the shoulder as a running lane, the emergency stopping lane as a running lane at different times, and how does all that work? And then you're into the post-crash care questions, and are there issues that might influence safe and efficient post-crash care in the event of a severe injury? So congestion, stopping space, again, probably most relevant in motorway style situations, but at least something everybody's thinking about in these assessments. Do emergency and medical services operate as efficiently and rapidly as possible? Are you in a very remote area where it's taking many, many hours for this to happen? And are there things that could be suggested or changed? I remember one in New Zealand around the Coromandel area, for those who know New Zealand, taking many hours to get to injured motorcyclists, motorcyclist infrastructure upgrade program and project. And these questions are sort of then generating, well, yeah, we're going to do all these things to improve that. We're going to do better signage and improve surfaces, and we're going to do underrun protection on the barriers. But there's still going to be motorcyclists injured, and many hours is causing trouble. And then some looking at, well, how do they get here, and why aren't they sending the helicopter, and where does the helicopter actually have to land? It has to land down the bottom of the mountain, and then is that and they actually built a few helicopter landing pads associated with the motorcycle safety infrastructure program. So that's a bit more out of the box thinking, isn't it, around holistic safety. Are other road users and emergency response teams protected during the event of a crash? Are drivers provided the correct information to address travel speeds on the approach to any incident? Is there reliable information via radio or VMS? And is there provision for e-safety, safety systems based on modern information, communication technology, cooperative intelligent transport systems and the like? So that's sort of the general question of the future and vehicles of the future. And again, if you're doing a mine site or the like, it's a fairly good question. If you're doing a really big, motorway upgrade, or you're doing a new tunnel or something like that, those sometimes have some pretty exciting discussions with the ITS people and how that's all going to be managed and what the systems in place and those sorts of things. But in your local intersection upgrades or your rural regional barrier jobs or whatever, it's probably not as relevant, but something you're thinking about. Okay, so those questions get asked, as I said, you just dot point ideas, thoughts, maybe talk to people, get some information around that, and that just sits in there. It may generate some suggestions to the project team, it may not. And then you produce your report and you put all of that into a report. And we're lucky now in the sense that what should be in the report in terms of the headings and all of those things, there are templates available. And so I don't need to really go through this in detail, because as long as you're using a template, it's going to cover off all of this information, like what the type of assessment. And I haven't talked to you really about full or rapid. I'll do that next module. But a full doesn't have all that wider thinking around the other elements and just really focuses on the matrix. But anyway, what was your team? What are the meetings? What's the process of a safe system assessment? Background context, the matrix, commentary around the other components and changes and alterations. So the templates we're going to provide you are, we use the Victorian government templates, but everybody seems to be happy across Australia and New Zealand to have that as the sort of template, and then you rebrand it with your own brand. And that it says it clearly on that. Happy for you to rebrand this, use it as your own, just use the same headings, the same structure, the same format, so everybody is producing consistent assessment reports. And I think that's a pretty good step forward to get a good consistency. People are comfortable with what comes in, what they see. So we're going to give you one of those shortly that you're going to be working with. Kathy, any questions before I jump on to actually starting to introduce that assignment? Because I'm pretty much done now explaining what a safe system is, how it's done. And of course, the best way to learn it, just get out there and start doing them. And you'll come up with questions and we'll get an idea. Kathy?
Ken, no questions at the moment. So, yep, we can run through the assignment.
Okay, well, I'll start by running through a bit of it, and then I'll hand I'll get Kathy to bring up some stuff on Moodle in a couple of minutes. What we're going to do is allocate you a upgrade design of an intersection. And some of you have already looked at it to check that it's close enough to your home or your office or wherever you want it to do, but you're going to get given that. And we're going to give you a template, which we've slightly modified in the sense that we've highlighted areas and crossed areas out. Just like your assignment for module 2, if it's highlighted yellow, you've got to do something, okay? And you'll see when Kathy brings it up shortly, we want some info on proposed works, and you're going to get the matrix, and you're going to have to fill out the matrix and put scores in and the like, okay? So anything yellow highlighted is what you'll be working on based on your site. We'll show you that in a second. But before we do that, you are going to be asked to go out to this site. And so I just want to give you a brief safety briefing for the site. Now, I should say that we've risk assessed all the sites, ensure that they can be done extremely safely. There's areas parked safely away from any danger. There's areas for you to be able to stand and observe that are not anyone, not on the road, and very just normal sort of pedestrianized areas and the like. So we've done a level of ensuring that these are low risk, but we ask that you are out there wearing a high-vis vest. We don't need you to go out there and measure lane widths and put your head down to look at the crossfall and anything like that, all right? You're just getting a general feel for how it operates. You're thinking about those different crash types, how they might occur. You're looking at a design and you're imagining that design built in this area. How does it tie in with the existing? How are things going to alter? How are people going to use this new design? We don't want you to be a hazard to others. So we don't want you making people walk on the road to get around you, or parking in that spot that forces cyclists out into high-speed traffic and the like. And what we've done is we've created a safe work method statement for this activity, which says some pretty common sense stuff. And Kathy's just now showing you there that the safe work method statement is zoomed in a bit, okay, is the PDF there. And that one is there to just shows that we've had to think about all of these things, and you're going to act appropriately. Things like relies on you not going out there when you're intoxicated, and pretty simple stuff. Things in there which aren't probably going to be that relevant, but if you did have to drive for a bit of time, that you're thinking about fatigue and those sort of things. So I think it'll be pretty standard for everybody, and you can have a look through that, and then we just ask you to take the quiz as such, which just basically says that you've read that and you're going to act appropriately, and you understand that we've assessed the risk, and but you've got a responsibility as well. Okay, so that's the safety aspect, site safety aspect of it. You will be, or you'll see shortly, you will be asked to take a photo of yourself on site, so that proves that you actually did go there. But here you can see all these PDFs are designs of upgrades to this intersection, and you'll see your name next to one of them. Could be you, could be a couple of people next to it. So there's one with a couple of people. And you will download that, make sure it's reasonably close to you, in the sense that we don't want you traveling a few hours to get to your site. It should be pretty close to whatever address you gave us. Then you're going to download the Word document. And the Word document is, as mentioned, the Victorian template. And of course, you can rebrand it if you wanted, but for this purpose of this, you can just leave it as it is. But anything highlighted, you're going to change. You're going to be required to do something. But we don't want an exact summary. That's going to waste your time, and I'm not going to read it anyway. So we don't want table of contents. Don't want any of that figure stuff. But if you're doing a real one, yeah, you're going to fill all of that out. You're going to make it all. We don't. Oh, we want you to put your name there. Now, we are okay if you work with others, right? So if you say, oh, I know those people, who have got the same site or see if they want to do this as a team. We are okay with it. If you've got it yourself, then obviously you're going to have to work by yourself. But if you do work with others and you do it sort of, there's two of you that do it as a team and you come up with a report, well, I need you to create two versions of that report and I need to see both of your names in both of the reports. So I know that these were done as a team. Okay, so I don't want to see two reports that are identical with only one person with their name in them. Yeah, so we don't want any of this. Of course, you do lots of this background and you're not going to get context for a lot of this. And that's just to try to make this just as streamlined and as quick as possible, to just so we are confident you understand this process and the like. But we do want you to put a little bit of info on the proposed works. Now, probably the easiest way to do this would be just a snip of the design and then just a sentence or two about what's being proposed. Not pages. Please, please don't write pages and pages of text, wasting your time. And again, I'm going to, have to read a lot of stuff there, which I probably won't read at all. I'll have a skim of that because that's not really what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the next bits. So an assessment summary, which is done after you've done your assessment. So you sort of summarize the outputs and the graph. We're going to ask you to produce a graph of the scores that you produce in the matrix. To make your life a little bit easier, we've created a graph generator spreadsheet tool. I mean, most of you would have been able to create this yourself in 2 minutes, but just to make life easy, once you're going through your matrix and you get your scores, you put some numbers in there, exposure, likelihood, and severity, hit return, and your graph sort of starts to produce itself. And you're only going to have one design option. So you'll have a graph with 2 bars under each category, and it'll be existing conditions and design. But feel free to use this whenever you want. Then you're going to copy the graph or use your snipping tool, snip it, plonk it in there, and we're going to be looking for that. If we see assessments come in and they don't have the graph, well, that's significant points off because that is such an important thing that people are looking for as an output. So really though, what the first thing you're going to have to do, and what you're going to spend the bulk of your time on, are these 2 matrices. So the one that's there is the existing conditions. So you're going to fill out information in there in the exposure comments, and you're going to put the score in the likelihood comments, and you're going to put dot point out factors that make you want to make that score higher, you want to make it lower, and your dot point in there, and then you put your score for each of those, your severity scores, justification on the severity, and then you multiply those through, it gives the product score, and you add them up and you get the total score. So you've got that nicely finalized for your existing conditions. You copy the whole table, copy, and then you paste. And you title that one design option 1, and then you modify it. You strike through using the strike through for any things that you'd put there that you want to get rid of. So there's the strike through, and anything new, you make it a different color. People mostly use red, seems to be fairly consistent. So new things, you just change the color of the text to red. And you go through and you modify all of those things that you put down, and you if you're putting a new number in, you're changing the number, change the color of the number, so we know that that number changed. And then you'll have that, pop it into the spreadsheet tool, get the graph, put the graph in, write a little summary, pop your numbers in there, spits out the graph, and off you go. Then you're going to get to this second last section, which are treatments to improve safe system alignment. And you'll see that there's 2 tables there. There's a primary and supporting. Now, primary doesn't necessarily mean this is my number one recommendation. It's any treatments you're suggesting that categorize as primary based on the Australian Safe System Assessment Framework. So you might have 5 primary treatments, or you might have no primary treatments. We'd like to see you have some primary treatments, but you might not. Or you might have no supporting, or you might have all supporting, or you have a few supporting. So what you're doing is you're looking at that design and you're saying, I'm worried about pedestrians, or we're going, oh yeah. So then you might be looking at these supporting, primary. You might even get some inspiration out of these as to what you might be able to include. Has it got cycling facilities? And okay, well, which cycling facilities, and are they categorized as primary or supporting? Or you might be making the judgment call yourself. So you're putting all of that information in there. You're coming up with ideas. You might be saying, well, I suggest raising this bit, or adding curb here, or putting a sign here, and then you're deciding where you categorize those. You don't do anything in the project response. All right? That is the reminder to whoever receives this report, the project team, hey, we've made a recommendation here, or we've given you an idea. What are you going to do? Are you going to take that on, integrate it into the project, change the design? Are you going to say, no, we can't do that for these reasons, or no, we're going to do something else? And that's just there to remind them, do something with this report. We're not going to get you to write up a flowing conclusion or anything like that, just to save time. Again, in a real one, you would. And in terms of photos, we don't want you to put lots of photos of the site and everything like that. We just want proof that you went to the site. So a selfie of you there in your high-vis vest on the site, or something like that, just to show us you went to the site. That's one of the sort of requirements of the course, is that you've gone to site, you've looked at the context, you've looked at it live, you know the benefit of seeing things in the real world as compared to on Street View and that sort of stuff. So that's just our proof that we can then go back to the different jurisdictions and the like when they see your name on a list, or you have, you're presenting them to your certificate, that they have confidence that you've done this full process. So they're your sites, and then you'll sort of finish that, and then you'll find there's a button if you're not in the. Oh no, where is the button? Okay.
Yeah, the button's disappeared. I'm sure it's there, but okay. Yeah.
So you will then hit upload. Please PDF it. It's easier for us, but if not, we'll survive. But the due date is Thursday, the 7th of April at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So you have 14 days and 2 hours remaining. The clock is ticking. Of course, in those 14 days and 2 hours, if at any point you're struggling, you're finding it overwhelming, you don't really understand bits of it, get in contact with us. Don't sit and stew and get annoyed at this whole thing or frustrated or anything like that. Put it aside, shoot through an email to Kathy or myself, say, hey, I'm struggling a bit with this. I don't understand this. Can we have a quick Zoom catch up or a phone call, or shoot through your particular question? Don't get too stressed out about it. Now, in reality, we allocated about 2 hours for this task, okay? About one module's worth for doing this task. It might take you a little bit if you've got to travel a little bit to get there or the like. But if you're sort of starting to get into this and finding, and thinking, oh my God, it's going to take me 10 hours to finish this, you're probably, for what it is, going far too far. We've really tried to pare this back to the key elements of competency that we want proven, and nothing more. So really, that gives you a bit of a feel for what we're thinking. So hopefully that'll, really, a couple of hours of solid work, and then it'll be plenty to really put something nice together. Okay, Kathy, are there any quizzes or anything as well?
Oh yes, there is. There is a quiz in module 4 as well for you to do, just like what the others have been like, and everyone's doing a great job with those quizzes. Thanks very much. I think some people are even jumping ahead where they can, which is good. 2 hours Ken time is usually a little bit more for the rest of us mere mortals, because I work with Ken and I know what he means when he says 2 hours. So it might be a little bit more than 2 hours, but yes, certainly if it gets anything beyond more than that, then do get in touch.
Yeah, all right. Well, okay.
Questions. Now's the time to ask. It's due before the next train. Oh, does the program say the report is due before the next training session? That's not quite right. We give you 2 weeks because basically we'd like you to go out and do the site visit and start on it within the next week, so that next session you can come back with questions, because as Ken said, when you get out there and do it, that's when you really go, oh, how does that work? And so come back to the next session with some questions, and then you can finalise your report. You've got about another week after that, or 14 days and 2 hours specifically. Oh, what have you got there, Ken?
Well, I just thought, because we have a couple of minutes here, that I would show like a real safe system assessment. And I'm not saying, of course, that anybody would need to do it into this depth, but it just probably helps people get a bit of an idea. So some sort of exec summary showing the different, the project, and within that a bit of summary of the different options available. So there's a bit there. But you can see here that it's immediately got the options scored, quite a few options here. I actually think that option 1 was existing and do nothing. So that's a bit misleading to call it an option. This is, yeah, that you can see there, we're seeing the scores play out quite, you can tell quite a story from that. And then some key findings, but some key recommendations come in there, and you can see them allocating them out to different different options. So if I go through that, the table of contents, lots more information about the scope of the project, really getting into some detail there, because it's not just, really trying to understand what the scope of the project is. Talking about then the assessment itself, what was done, and the team. You can see quite a big team in this one, so lots of people decided to jump on board that one. When they went out to site, what meetings and the like that they had. The context, now they look familiar, don't they? Prompt questions and answers. So that, ensure that that context is captured nicely. This stuff is straight out of any of the templates and just talks about, well, what is this assessment? How does it happen? Because people who are not familiar with it like to sort of understand a bit about it. Here's the scoring sheet, so they can reference back to that. And then we're into the matrices, okay? And you can see there, because these are vehicles and the intersection mustn't be excessive, they've got the scores out there. And you can see there the sort of level of detail in a full one that they're providing in terms of factors that increase. That this is likelihood and likelihood still. So there's a fair bit of detail there. And then into severity, and there's a bit of severity there, and a good bit of detail and the scores. And that's the existing conditions. And then we'll see this repeated then, but modified for each of these options. And you can see a bit of modification and changing and updating and getting to some nice analysis. And we'll see, those come in nicely sort of presented by this team in terms of different colors. So you can sort of refer to the red chart or the yellow, yellow matrix or the like. Then a nice bit of a summary there, mapped out nicely as well. That helps. for consumability for whoever's reading these outputs to understand that. Some summarizing of scores, and there'll be some just going to get some recommendations, hopefully. So here's some information on the other questions, and they may have generated ideas. And then the recommendations, or ideas for consideration, the table's titled ideas for considerations, which I like sort of referring to them as ideas for consideration, because I'm always sort of I don't feel we're quite in a position to be making recommendations to a project team, even though we're really trying to understand their context. I kind of feel that, if you've worked on any major projects or anything like that, the amount of, conflicting, challenging things you're trying to work with, you're sort of saying, here's some ideas to consider. I like to try and be friendly about it, but others like to be a bit more big stick about it. You really should be doing this and the like. But you'll see there, and they're saying, this recommendation refers to design option 2, 3, 4, and 4A, or, this one only for design option 2. Consider providing physical separation between the lanes and the median, or whatever it is. And so they're the recommendations, categorized, supporting, other, and a bit of conclusion, photos from the site visits. And that'll probably be it. There might be, now we're not driven by crash history, but sometimes people like to have a look at what's going on in the area, but that it's up to you whether you use that or not. It just might help you contextualize things. A bit of a land use map just to, again, contextualize some of that. But you can see there it's quite a comprehensive one. I mean, these are these are $75 million, $100 million infrastructure projects. So they get a fair working over from a safe system assessment team, which is pretty exciting considering that. And, people might say, well, but we do road safety audits, but, this doesn't just, this starts to quantify and says that one's better than this one, and these things are different. And that thing you're doing is really good. I mean, you don't get that in a road safety audit. It's just, we're worried about this and that. So some pretty good advantages. But, okay, that's like, as I say, that's a full massive exercise. What we want you to do is just prove to us you understand those key bits. You can be more succinct in your matrix than that was. You can just dot point, don't need to write it out in sentences. You can just dot point your ideas and factors and the like. Questions?
Yes, thanks, Ken. There was a question about rapid safe system assessments. Is the assessment in the road safety audit typically a rapid safe system assessment?
No, it is a different exercise altogether. A road safety audit and a safe system assessment, different. They start, they will look at similar features sometimes and bits overlap and the like, but no, different, completely different exercises, presented in different ways, provide a different purpose. The outputs are different with scores in safe system assessments and just sort of levels of risks. And safe system assessments are looking at things that are positive as well as things that are not giving as much value as they could, and things that might cause a risk. So yeah, different. We're getting closer. I mean, we're putting more and more elements of safe system assessments into road safety audits, but still a very different sort of thing.
Some context behind that question is that some road safety audits ask for a safe system assessment to be concluded.
Yeah, and I've seen this sort of done, and I'm always reluctant when asked to do that, to do a road safety audit and then slap a matrix on the back of it, a completed matrix on the back of it. I mean, you're sort of getting there, but as you can see, I like that everybody follows the the standard template and process, and everybody's consistent with the format and what we're producing and all of this for safe system assessments and road safety audits. But when projects are doing that, they're just trying to sort of, what I would prefer under that is to say, okay, where are we at in this project? Are we at early planning phase, high level concepts and the like? If so, don't do a road safety audit, right? The safe system assessment will capture all of that. If they go, we're at detailed design phase, go, don't do a safe system assessment. Just do your road safety audit the way you usually have. That would be a far better way to be operating than trying to sort of merge these two into something that's probably a little deficient, especially in the safe system assessment.
Lovely. I think that's all the questions we've got, and I think you've covered everything beautifully there, Ken. Everybody will be right with that. Yes, you don't have to get your report in before next session, just before the 7th of April, because I think that leaves you with some Easter time marking there, Ken. We've finished a few minutes early, so that's good because you can all do your quiz, and we'll see you next week, or you'll see us next week.
Thank you, everybody. Enjoy doing the assessment. It's fun. It's fun. You'll enjoy it.
Yeah, your definition of fun is different.
I'm excited for Easter. See you, everybody.